Hi, I'm Dale Powell, and welcome to that Spirit of Quiet Days. I call these days that are a little bit after Christmas and right as we ease into the new year, the quiet days, because I think it's a great time for us to reflect and remember some of the places we've been in over the course of our lifetime. Now, if you're 50 years or older, like I am, but if you're 50 years old or in your 60s or in your middle 60s or older than that even, and if you lived anywhere east of the Rockies and north of southern Georgia, you remember the winters of 1977 and 1978. Now, not as many people will remember the winter of 1977, but it was pretty intense here in southern Ohio. I understand it wasn't as widespread as what 78 was, but it was pretty intense also. In 1977, that was the first year that I had a paper route, essentially my first job, and it was a motor route that required us to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, and I delivered Cincinnati Enquirers, and I covered 3 different counties. I had part of Adams County, part of Scioto County, and part of Pike County. Well, I actually had all of Pike County, Ohio. But that's where my route was. And at first, I wasn't driving. I was only 14 at the time. But my dad was driving us. And I remember still, it was a pretty intense job. That meant getting up early, putting the papers together, smelling that terrible newsprint, getting it all over you, and then delivering papers. It took about 5 hours to do. But for a kid, it meant I earned about $150 a month. Now, I know $150 a month today doesn't sound like a lot, but to me, I was wealthy making $150 a month. Not a whole lot of kids had $150 a month to spend in my area at that time. So that put me in a pretty good situation. But I want to talk about that blizzard of 77. By mid-January, I know where I was, we had already exhausted an awful lot of our snow days. I remember one particular Tuesday evening, we were coming home from a high school basketball game. We'd already missed a whole lot of days because of the snow, and I think we were already on makeup days and everything like that. And I remember when we were coming home, there was kind of a rain snow coming down. This would have been January 24th, 1978. And me and some of my friends, we speculated, well, I hope that we don't miss school because we don't want to have to be going to school in July. Well, as it turned out, we did get enough that I think we did go to June 17th that year. I don't ever remember the school district where I still live. I don't ever remember them going longer than that, but we did. I think we had to go to June 17th. By the next morning, a pretty big snow had come on Wednesday, but then on Thursday, January 26th, came the blizzard of 1978, and it was like a blizzard. I had never seen one like that, and I've never seen one quite like that since. Now, it wasn't a tiny local snowfall. It paralyzed entire states. The storm affected the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes region, including Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Kentucky, Wisconsin, and even parts of southern Ontario got really affected by this. It was terrible. Winds gusted to hurricane force, with drifting snow reported to be 10 to 25 feet high. I didn't see that, but I do remember seeing a complete shed, about like the one behind me. I remember seeing one that was almost completely covered in snow. There were some incredible drifts. Snow often fell continuously for more than a day, with some areas reporting over 3 feet of snow. Now, I do remember one time here in southern Ohio, 1994, over Martin Luther King Day, we did get 3 feet of snow one time. But other than that, I don't ever remember snow coming so fast, so quickly. I don't think people realize just what winter can be like when you have to get out in it. And I've been fortunate most of my life, I haven't had to. But I can remember the snow just fell and fell. And it wasn't just cold, it was relentless. It was a snow that didn't melt. I remember not seeing the ground for 2 months. wind that cut straight through your coat. And before daylight, long before daylight, I was out delivering newspapers. Now, at first, this was a bit of a family operation. My dad drove the blue van, yeah, that blue van that he had forever. Then my brother Mark and I, we actually delivered the papers. Then, of course, later, and once Mark graduated from high school, it was just me. And by the time Mark graduated, I was actually doing it all on my own, which meant here I was, 16 years old. I assembled the papers, and I drove around 3 counties on a Sunday morning before most of you got out of bed. And let me tell you, some of those winters were pretty intense. I learned early that winter doesn't care how old you are, though. Some mornings the snow was so deep that I had to wade through it, 30 inches in places. And that's where one of the best ideas I ever got, and I still did this. I was playing Scrooge at a Christmas parade earlier this year, and it was 14 degrees. And I thought, man, my feet always get cold. So what did I do? A trick that my mom told me, and she read it from this column she used to read all the time, Hints from Heloise. I never read the column in my life, but I sure heard a lot about it because my mom read Hints from Heloise. And Heloise said that if you take bread bags and you put on one pair of socks, put on a pair, a bread bag, and then put another pair of socks over it, your feet will not get cold. And you know what? It works. The paper route was something that, man, I basically hated it when I had it, but boy, it sure does bring back a lot of good memories now. And I realized it afforded me a lot of things. Among the things it didn't afford me was, unlike a lot of my peers, I never went out on Saturday night because I had to be up so early on Sunday. Getting there at 3 meant you got up at 2:30. And so that doesn't allow a teenager to have any free time on a Saturday night. And like I said, I did my partying on Friday, I guess you would say. Among the things that it did afford me was I could really indulge myself a little bit. And to me, that meant buying record albums and buying magazines. And you got to realize there was no internet yet. So the things, if I wanted to find out things about David Bowie or Kiss or the Rolling Stones or some of the music I listened to, I had to buy magazines about that. And I could afford to do that. But you got to realize, I remember a Circus magazine, which was one of the rock and roll magazines at the time, cost $1.25. Well, that's nothing today, but it was nothing to sneeze at that time. And I know, of course, my mom thought I was wasting my money on it, but that was something that it did afford me. I want to tell you about one particular incident. You've heard the stories where people say, well, when I was a kid, I had to walk to school uphill both ways 3 miles. Well, I never had to walk to school in the snow because they generally canceled school if there was snow. But I do remember one time, and you got to realize this is a day where there are not cell phones. Not a whole lot of families had more than one car. We did have 2, but I can remember one was down for whatever reason. And Mark and I were out on the paper route, and the weather turned really, really bad. It wasn't that bad when we left, but I can remember it turned really, really bad. And I live on a road called Big Bear Creek Road, and at the beginning of that, off of State Route 104, is a place they call the mouth of Bear Creek. If you can get up the mouth of Bear Creek, you can usually navigate the road. But getting up the mouth is a little bit hard because it's straight up and it has quite a grade to it, and you can't really get any speed. Well, I can remember one time the blue van just wasn't going to go up that mouth of Bear Creek. There were no cell phones, and we were 3 miles from home. Mark and I had no choice but to walk. Well, we thought we would call Dad, but then we remembered, oh, the car's not working. We can't get a hold of him. I do remember we stopped at one of my former teachers' homes, Ann Raisin, I remember we stopped at our home when we were walking and we tried to call, but her phone was out because of the storm. So we had to walk. We walked 3 miles in the snow, and I can remember when we got home, I had never seen my dad so worried. Dad was not a worrier, but he was actually pacing because he didn't know where we were. He didn't know how to find us. He didn't know which direction to go because the paper route covered all kinds of area. But I can remember that was a very intense time, and that's one of the memories I have. And you know, sometimes it's fun to sit around and think about those things. The good old days weren't always good, but they were eventful. I hope that as you are here in the quiet days, that you can sit around and think about some of the times. And you know what? If there's a younger person around who doesn't know your story, why don't you tell them? Take care.